Welcome to our webinar about data storytelling. My name is Emma Early and I'm the Product Consulting Manager at Yellowfin.
And my name is Diksha and I'm the Customer Success Manager here at Yellowfin.
Both of our LinkedIn details are below, so feel free to stalk us and pretty much follow us for all the latest and greatest information. During today's webinar, guys, I'm going to actually send out a few poll questions. So I've just pinged you across our very first poll question. What we're trying to do is get an insight as to where people are at in their journey with data storytelling. So feel free to send that along. While we're also getting that completed, there's going to be time at the end for questions to be asked. So feel free to put the questions into the question panel and we can do that Q&A right at the end of the session. And of course, this session is being recorded. So at the completion of this, you'll get an email in the next couple of days with a link to the YouTube video so you can watch it again and share it with your colleagues and things as well. All right, loving the participation. So I'm just gonna close the poll now and I can share those results with you guys. So you'll see here, it looks like we've got a lot of beginners in the room. So really great to see everyone sort of starting to wanting to improve their stories and quite a lot of people who have never written one. So this is going to be super exciting. All right, let's kick on. So storytelling, it's not actually a new concept. It actually has been around for a really long time, and there's been a number of studies by various researchers and universities and such about the effect of stories on readers. So a really great study that I wanted to introduce us to today was actually by Deb Small and her colleagues from the University of Pennsylvania. They wanted to determine the most effective way to raise money for Save the Children. So during the study, they actually created two different versions of a particular brochure or flyer to be able to see whether utilizing different design strategies could encourage the public to reach deeper into their pockets and donate more money. So what you're looking at here is the very first version that they created. It had a real focus on statistics. It was really powerful in terms, like some of these statistics are very eye-opening. Like 165 million children suffer from malnutrition. The second version is more similar to what we're looking at here. And, oh, hang on. Oh, apologies, I pressed the button too early. But the second version actually had a story. So the story was about a 7-year-old girl from Mali who was faced with the severe threat of starvation. So in your opinion, which one do you think would actually resonate more with the audience? Collecting responses there. All right, I'll close that off. So vast majority of us are predicting that the story version actually had resonated the most. So let's have a look at what they had. So with this, actually, it's completely true. The story version did actually resonate more. Not only did the people who read the second story donate more money, they actually donated twice as much money. So it's a pretty impressive finding, and we're going to dive into why that was the case later. But it just goes to show that individuals are much more likely to buy, or in this case, donate to people or to organizations whose story they believe in and it resonates with them. All right, Diksha, do you want to run us through our plan for today's session?
Sure. So today we'll be running through the concept of storytelling and its true value. Emma will also later on provide us with some tips and guidance on how to tell a good story. So what is data storytelling? Before we get into that, let's take a bit of a step back and first understand what is storytelling. Anthropologists tells us that storytelling is central to human existence and that it's pretty common to every known culture. It involves a semiotic exchange between teller and listener, an exchange we learn to negotiate pretty much since birth. This concept is a big part of our daily life and how we relate to things around us. It's from that first Disney movie that we watched when we were kids, the footy results that we read online, and the news that we tend to scroll around in Instagram as well. It's around us every day, which makes us wonder, why do we even tell stories? So just as the brain detects patterns in the visual forms, whether it be a face, a figure, a flower, and in sound, So too it detects patterns in information. Stories are somewhat recognizable patterns, and in those patterns we tend to find meaning. We use stories to make sense of our world and share that understanding with others. They are essentially the signal within the noise. Which takes us back to our very first question from our presentation. What is data storytelling? Data storytelling weaves data and visualization into a narrative tailored to a specific audience in order to convey credibility in the analytical approach, give confidence in the results, and a compelling set of insight that is actionable to the audience. The narrative is the key vehicle to convey insights. And the visualization, so your charts, your graph, your infographics, they're important proof points to back up the narrative. Research conducted by the Stanford University shows us that when an audience is presented with statistics, it activates two particular parts of the brain, which enables the language understanding so that we can understand the statistics, but not actually really feel them. But when story is shared, on the other hand, the whole brain is actually activated, and it moves us both intellectually and emotionally. This makes the experience much more memorable. So if you think about back the movie The Dark Knight, which was released about 10 years ago, chances are you still remember what happened between Batman and the Joker. But what if I asked you what happened to your red wine inventory maybe about a year ago or 2 years ago? Unless you've got some sort of super amazing photographic memory, it's quite unlikely you'll know the exact figures or what actually happened on top of your head. So if you're interested in learning more about this research, we definitely recommend you reading this paper by Jennifer Archer from Stanford University. So people are starting to see more the value of data storytelling, which brings us to the topic on data journalism. It's very common to hear that analysts and data scientists struggle to communicate back to the non-technical users of the company. I'm sure there have been times where you look at a report and you understand the visualization quickly, but it takes you some time to convey what do you actually need to do about it, or why it really matters to you. And this is where data literacy is formed. It is the ability for employees to derive meaningful insights from data and apply those insights in a way that benefits the organization. And this gap has what has led us to the rise of data journalism, which is now becoming widely available in universities and colleges today. Let's talk a little bit about, the benefits of stories. Data. Data tells you what is happening, but stories, on the other hand, it actually tells you why it matters. It helps bring the data to life, plus, like I mentioned before, it's very memorable. Putting data in sequence using stories helps the audience and the business understand the context and make useful connections between each point and take some sort of action. All right, Emma, do you want to maybe share with us today how we can write a good story?
Definitely. So now that we understand why we're telling stories and the power that a story actually can have on a reader, we now need to start to think about how do we write these stories. So there's actually a lot of material around this online. We did plenty of research for this topic to make sure we were trying to give you guys the best tips possible. I've actually pulled out five of my favorite tips, I should say, that were about this topic that I think will be very useful for everybody. So the very first one is to understand your audience. Who are you actually writing the story for? Are you preparing it for the CEO? Are you preparing it for your internal team? Or are you preparing it for a public-facing forum such as a blog or a website? Knowing who that person is or who those people are that you're trying to target, then can it help you answer the next couple of questions. What are their data literacy levels? Okay, what's their time poorness? If it's your CEO, you need to be quick and to the point. If it's your analytics team, we have more advanced data literacy levels compared to perhaps the general public, where we have to assume it's pretty minimal and we need to cater for everybody. We also need to make sure we're targeting the message towards the audience. So every story should have a purpose, and we should be making sure that it's suitable for everyone in the room or reading the story. And lastly, the story should be having some sort of action or decision as a result of reading it. So again, understanding that audience is really important to make sure that we're pushing the right messages across. Next, we need to think about the structure of our story. And as Diksha mentioned earlier, every movie, TV show, books, and good story follows a pretty similar structure. There's a number of linguistic theories around story structure, but the most common one you'll come across is the simple story arc. So a good story should have an introduction where you can set the scene. It should be followed by a conflict, such as a tragic event. Then it builds up to the climax of the story. And this is where the audience gets to feel all the emotion and the tension of the story. Finally, we get to the resolution, and this is where we can start to see how the future is going to pan out. So if you think of your favorite movie or book, you can probably very easily fit it into the story arc. Since we're on the theme of superheroes from Batman, let's pick another classic such as Spider-Man. So if you think about that movie or the comics even, first you get introduced to nerdy Peter Parker. Then the conflict occurs, where he's bitten by the radioactive spider, which gives him superpowers. The climax builds as he has to fight off villains, all while learning how to tame his superpowers and fight off his own internal demons as well. Until finally we reach the resolution, where he defeats the villain and gets the girl. Now, it's all nice and easy to relate a story arc to something fictional such as these sorts of movies, but actually you can do this with your business stories too. So if we just think about trying to write a story, we always will want to start with an introduction, and this is to help set the context of what we're trying to tell the business. The conflict is you calling out your key insight or your key message, which is the purpose of that story. Then you build the climax. This is where you're going to take a deeper dive into the insights that you found, provide all the supporting evidence, you get to, why did it happen? How did it happen? Then finally, we finish with a conclusion and a call to action. My next tip is to tell the truth. As analysts, we're trusted with translating the most important data from our businesses to our business users. We should never be blurring the lines or trying to get creative with the numbers to suit ourselves. So make sure you guys stick to the facts. We need to be avoiding unnecessary noise. Yeah. All right, so next up we want to visualize. So every good story needs some sort of visualization to support it. So Diksha mentioned before that the narrative is kind of key, but without actually having the visual evidence to support it, people don't know what to believe. So data visualization is kind of a topic all on its own. I'm not going to dive into data viz best practices. I'm pretty sure we actually already have a webinar about that, or maybe that'll be coming out really soon. But just a few tips that I wanted to think about when we're building our visualizations. Just make sure you choose the right visualization for the data you're trying to portray. You want to make sure you keep your visualizations simple and clear. Avoid the unnecessary noise again. And lastly, I've just got an additional point here about placement of the axis. Now, this is a bit of a pet peeve of mine, so I have a little example here. Now, this is something I came across on the weekend. My husband and I were actually we're on the property hunt, right? So we actually went to some properties. We found a really great one that we were very excited about. Jumped online to do some additional research about the suburb. And this is what we came across. And this was on a website, which is, a real estate website. So their goal is to be trying to sell properties. My husband came across this. He almost fell off his chair. He said, we cannot possibly invest in this area. It's plummeting. We've got to go right now. Even I was, oh gosh, what have we done? But on second glance, when you do look at this report, you actually see that the axis isn't starting at zero. And in fact, that plummet that we were so concerned about, it's like $5,000. So in the grand...
That's not really much.
Exactly, yeah. So in the grand scheme of things, this is one of those areas where they didn't consider who their audience is. The general public see this, and they should realize that not everyone is data literate. Not everyone's going to be checking the axis is starting at zero. So they need to make sure that they're not exaggerating something just for drama. Like it's not actually portraying the truth there. All right, my last point is to make sure that we conclude our stories. So this always just makes me think back to the university days and even my school teaching days. We have to write official conclusions. So you need to make sure that you restate your main arguments and then offer suggestions for the next action or the decision that needs to be made. So I have a couple of interesting examples of data stories that I wanted to just sort of talk us through. I'm not going to go through them in great detail, but I've put a couple of links on the next couple of slides so you can follow them up. The first one that you can see here is titled Unwanted, the ongoing war against daughters in India. This is a very powerful example of a data story. It's a very serious topic. However, prior to the release of this story, it was quite an unspoken issue in India and unknown around the world. However, the publicity and the media coverage that followed this story has actually raised much needed awareness and support of the issue on a global level. The reason I think that this story was so impactful was because of the way they delivered it through this data story. I recommend you taking a look at this story, not only just to read the content itself, but actually to observe the structure. It's very well thought out. You can see they've targeted a very particular audience and they use a fantastic mix of like technical narrative supported by data visualization, such as you can see one of them here on the screen, as well as like an emotional narrative. Like you really feel the story when you're reading through this. It's really powerful. On a less serious note or very different tone, we can see stories everywhere. So here's another example from realestate.com.au. These sorts of stories you'll see on most property websites. You get them on banks, superannuation companies, telecoms. They're sometimes in the form of blogs or insight areas. And these are all what we call data stories. Sometimes we just probably didn't realize that was what we were reading. Even my phone bill and my electricity bill tells me a story. Because not only does it have my transactions, but there's always these great little visualizations on there that compare my billing from, this month to last month and this time last year, as well as my favorite is on your like electricity and gas, you'll get the comparison to households in your area or depending on your household size. And they actually tell you a little story in there that it's actually a very clever way of actually getting me to pay attention to my bill. So there are a few other examples and stuff there. All right, so that's enough examples from me. Diksha, do you want to talk about when we should utilize stories?
Sure. Let's rewind a little bit and maybe talk a bit about dashboards. Today, dashboards are the most common delivery method of insights. And it's safe to say that business users are very overwhelmed by it, but we can't help to continuously use them. It's the primary method by which the majority of business users consume their data, and we continue to struggle to discover, understand, and act. So here's another question to everybody listening in today, especially the business users. How many of you repeatedly log in to look at your dashboard for analysis? How many of us actually do have the data literacy skills? I'm not saying that we don't, but the majority of us may not. Or how many of us actually have the time to slice and dice through the data? We honestly just want to know why. And this is where stories become super powerful, as it allows us to communicate your findings to others and convince them to take an action and show them why. Does this mean that we should ditch dashboards completely? Cole Malfik, she's an ex-Googler and has a podcast called Storytelling with Data. And in one of her episodes, she talks about the future of storytelling and touches on the topic about dashboards. Do we still use them? Imagine you're the regional sales manager for Coca-Cola, and you start off your day by logging into Salesforce, and you've got your dashboard all set up. You can exactly see who your hottest leads are for today, and your deals are in your pipeline for this month. And this is when using a dashboard kind of makes sense, because you already know what you want or need to view. It even makes sense when you're still learning about your audience or investigating your issue. Let's now paint a little bit of a different picture in your head. So you're still the same character, so still the regional sales manager for Coca-Cola, but this time you need to convince your marketing director, who claims to be very time poor, that you need to increase their marketing spend in New South Wales. You could go the linear way and show them your insights and show them, sales is going to increase in the next 6 months by twice the value. Or you could bring them on an emotional journey with you and help them explain why. This is when stories become super valuable. Cole later explains that when we frame a story that matters to our audience and a story that resonates with them, it drives them to take a better understanding and take some sort of action. Now, like all good storytellers, let's finish off with a conclusion.
Thanks, Deepa. All right, so hopefully you've learnt the importance of stories today. For all the data geeks on the line, you probably have really strong data literacy skills. And so you actually do understand data in its rawest form, but it's something really important that we need to note is that not everybody does. So I won't say all business users, but not all business users will understand data the way we do. And that's why telling it in the form of a story is actually so much more powerful. By combining this data, visualizations, and a story, we actually can hit a really sweet spot to help the business understand their business and make informed, data-driven decisions. So if we follow that advice, we actually believe that data analysts and business users could actually live happily ever after by utilizing data stories more as opposed to dashboard overload. We'd like to thank you for joining our session today. We hope you've learned something new and you've been motivated to go out and rethink some of your insight delivery methods. We're going to take questions now. So, okay. All right, we've got quite a few questions coming through here. The first question, probably nice, fairly easy one actually. So how is storytelling different from data visualization? I'll take this one. Data viz is really just the visualization itself. So I guess it is easy to kind of get them confused that you might think the narrative is part of that, but really the narrative is the story, and you're trying to use that narrative to, you're trying to use the visualization to support your story. So they're two separate things, but combined together, they're this very powerful resource. What else have we got? A couple of comments. Oh, some people have enjoyed it. Great. All right, here's another question. How does Yellowfin support storytelling? Diksha, did you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So with Yellowfin, we easily allow you to combine your text narrative alongside with your visualization. So your pie chart, your timeline graph, and your images to bridge the gap for business users easily. We've got another question here. This one's a little bit of an interesting one. Do you think dashboards are dead? Emma, do you want to take
I was actually at a conference the other day, and this is what they said. They did say that dashboards were dead. I'm not sure that I will go as far as to say they're dead, because dashboards have a really, important place. There are particular use cases that are perfect for dashboards. However, we just need to always make sure we're stepping back and looking at the purpose of what we're trying to portray and who we're trying to portray it to work out, do we need a dashboard for this? Could we use storyboard, or should we be writing a story? So I think there's room for all of them, and it's about finding the best fit for the purpose of what you're trying to say. All right, let's do recording. Yes, there's definitely recordings coming through. All right, let's do one last question. Can we recommend any good books on data storytelling? I haven't read any physical books on this, but I have been doing a lot of research online. Isn't that funny how physical books aren't as common anymore? Yeah, so online we found plenty of research. The universities seem to be having far more detailed research around that. So the University of Pennsylvania had the study that we did, and I'm forgetting what the other study was that Diksha mentioned, but they'll be in the slides. But you can definitely refer to those for more information about it. But honestly, if you actually just start to Google storytelling best practices or data storytelling, you'll find plenty of resources out there. I know Makeover Monday is actually also bringing out a new book, so I would recommend having a look at that. But it has a focus on data visualization as well as storytelling. Sorry, Diksha, were you going to add something?
Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to butt in, but yes, there is actually a really good book that is available. So as I mentioned before, called Nelfix. So she's an ex-Googler and used to work in Google Analytics actually. So she's got the podcast called Storytelling with Data, so that's completely free. But if you just Google that, she's actually got a book, and I've heard that she does run workshops as well. So that could be a good starting point as well to see, how can you get started with data storytelling.
Awesome. All right, another question came through of can we recommend any wireframe tools for data storytelling? So with the wireframes, I guess I'm assuming you're wanting actually like a method of delivering the story perhaps, or maybe it's about planning it. From a wireframing perspective, I use a tool called Balsamic, and as well as another one that we have in the office. But they're not sort of, I guess, like they're how we can plan things out, but they're not necessarily what I would deliver this on. I would deliver these, I would deliver these in Yellowfin, where, through the sharing of reports and stories and storyboards there. Diksha, can you just advise the name of that author you were just talking about? Someone just asked for her name.
Her name is Cole Nelfic, so spelled Cole, and her last name is Knaflic. I think she's got a middle name, but if you just Google that, you should get that online.
Awesome. Okay, I think that's all of the questions that have come through. So I think we're finishing perfectly on time. We'd like to thank everyone for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed it, and please feel free to send any of your feedback. We'd really appreciate it. Have a great day.